Have you tried the new Pinpoint disposables yet? They're seriously smooth. They're so small they fit in that little coin pocket in your jeans. They're easy to use and they hit just right. And whether you're trying to chill or vibe or take things up a notch, these compact sized vapes bring the flavor and the effects without any hassle. Just grab one, take a hit, and you're good to go. They're perfect for when you're on the move or just kicking back, and they're definitely worth checking out. And if you want to check out more about Pinpoint vapes, check out pinpoint-extracts.com.
Welcome back to Greenway Audio Magazine. I'm your host, Tim Pickett, and I am with my best little buddy over here, Brandon. Hi, Brandon.
Joshy G. Willikers. Hey, Timmy.
How are you, bud?
I'm doing okay, man. How are you?
Good. So this is episode 5. Can you believe that?
I mean, that's how numbers work, Tim.
That is how numbers work. How do you feel like it's going so far?
I feel like you're doing great.
I feel like we both are doing great. I feel like we both have a great rapport. This has definitely been a learning process. I can tell a huge difference between episode 1 and episode 4.
I could tell a huge difference between episode 1 and episode 2, and then episode 2 and episode 3. And I think once we got to 3, we really started hitting our stride.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think episode 4 has probably been the best one so far because that's the one that I think I talked the least in.
Oh, buddy.
So I think we've really figured out the right rhythm.
I think we have.
The less I talk, the more successful we are.
No, because you're smarter than me in a majority of this, especially in this industry. But I think we got to figure out some of the microphone oddities, dogs snoring, phones ringing. I think we figured out how to block all that out, and we've upgraded some of our equipment.
Still haven't fixed my lighting issue though, so
that's okay. That. It's kind of cool. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know why. It's like you have an aura, you know. There it is.
Yep.
Right on
Something
cue,
like that.
baby. So I will recommend, if you're listening to this in the car or the audio version, check out the video version because we have some cool stuff in there. We've got some. Did you hear my computer? Everything is on silent, do not disturb. So anyway, if you're listening to this in the car on the audio version, why don't you mosey on over to YouTube and watch the video version and Spotify. Right?
Yeah,
they do video.
We've got video on Spotify and on YouTube.
Yeah,
we've got audio versions on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and Audible with a few more distribution points to come in the next few weeks.
That's right. So the cool thing is on the video version, we pull up some of the topics we're talking about. We got some funny little anecdotes in there, and every time I screw up, I make sure that everybody knows. And so watch the video version. What happened, Brandon? The aura?
Just the lighting, man. Like, I don't know what's going on.
It's okay. So today, let's talk about, there's a few really fun things that we can talk about. First off, Bodhi is back. We're talking about Bodhi again, except this time we have the result.
Yeah,
Brandon.
The winners are out. Everybody knows who won and has been talking about it for the last week or so. So super excited to be able to actually have a little bit of discussion about who won and stuff.
Yeah. Let's get into some of the highlights. Were there on your end? Were there any like big surprises?
I think the probably two biggest surprises for me were Tracy Black winning Woman of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
I was super excited to see that. They're a relatively small company in comparison to some of the other ones with S24 Holdings. They do Plume, they do Lakewater, they have Latitude Dispensary. And so to see Tracy, she was featured as one of our women to watch this year. To see her really get some extra shine and, basically as a newcomer, take the Woman of the Year this year. I thought that was really cool. I don't know that it was super unexpected, but seeing Adolphus Bush win Executive of the Year was pretty cool. That was actually a really tight race. There were 3 people. Yeah, there were 3 people that were within, I think, 3 or 4 points of each other, and it was Adolphus, Brandon Green from C4, and Boston Dickerson from Show Me Organics.
All 3 makes sense.
Yeah. 3 really cool guys, 3 really great companies. Also 3 wildly different companies as far as what they do.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think that's really cool to see, kind of the scope of that. I think it's a little interesting that Belief won Company of the Year, but I don't think they won any other awards. But I think that also goes
they got Mo
to
Muzzy, best wholesale sales.
Oh, that's right, Mo. But I think that also goes to their company as a whole, that they weren't being propped up by any one product or any one individual thing happening this year necessarily. I think since Kevin Riggs and Tom and Mitch and Joey Pentozzi have been there at kind of restructured the company and kind of been reframing it for the last year or so. I think a lot of people have seen a lot of changes with that company, and I think that's why it was reflected in their win. What did you see as your standout categories or as your standout interests or anything like that?
There was a few of them. Their startup of the year, Emaleaf. Do you know about Emaleaf?
I know a little bit. Obviously we've done a piece on them before.
Right.
We did a Brands to Watch feature.
Yep.
And I think everybody in the industry knows who Tammy P is.
Well, of course. And actually, Emaleaf is a woman-owned MIP outside of, they're out of Ashland, Missouri, which I had to look up because I knew it was around Columbia, but it's just a little south of Columbia. So they feature, they have whole bud pre-rolls. They have Jumbo J's and Pocket J's with wax infusion as an option for both. And then they have what would you call it? Like a budget line called Our Cousin Dave, which I think is pretty cool. Pre-rolls and sugar wax. They also have hard candy called Just Right, and a product that I have tested. It was not infused at the time, but it was absolutely delicious. They have Moonrise edibles. I had it was like a brownie as a late night snack. It was delicious. So good. So anyway,
you had the uninfused version?
I had the uninfused.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were handing out samples of the uninfused, and delish, bro. Holy cow. So good. So that was cool to see them, like a new name out there, and then obviously Tammy P works with them. If you've not seen the tea with Tammy P, you got to check it out on YouTube. I'm going to pop that in here. It's hilarious. Her and Doug Hall. So good. Let's see what else. For best accountant, Sarah Bantz. And I will say, I did vote for her because she is my accountant and she's awesome. I know
she's been,
yeah, good.
She's been really great. We've worked with her on a few articles and stuff in the past. And I believe that means that Smith Patrick's won that award almost every year.
I was about to say, I think they have a pretty nice sweep going on of that category. And then, not shocking, Vivid won Product of the Year and Best Flower Cultivar for Florida Kush, which makes complete sense, being that the nation agrees.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty indicative of what the market looks like whenever you've got the top selling flower cultivar in the country coming out of your market. So
Yeah. So that did make sense. And on top of, I don't know if you ever saw their Taste Your Own Medicine campaign. Awesome. Very powerful. Very powerful.
I have, and I love what Tony's done with their Tony Bellmeyer runs their advertising and marketing over at Show Me Organics. I love what he's done with their entire thought process and their branding, and with everything from Buoyant Bob to Missouri Zone to Vivid, everything kind of has its own identity. And I thought the Taste Your Own Medicine campaign was kind of the perfect bridge for where we were and where we are, just as cannabis and society. And so it was a really cool campaign. There were a handful of other really good campaigns as well. One of the ones that kind of came out of left field that I hadn't expected that got a lot of traction was the Vibe STL Canna Moms Milk Money campaign that they did. And that produced a concentrate that wound up being nominated. It produced a campaign that wound up being nominated. It was just kind of something that came out of left field, and I thought it was really cool. And obviously our friends at Timeless were nominated for a few different awards and things as far as the Shred for the Cure, and they didn't win in a few of the categories, but I know they took home Distillate Vape of the Year, Best Distillate Vape. So it was nice to see a lot of parity. And I don't think there was anybody that just ran away with all the awards like we've seen in some years.
I agree.
I was super excited to see a lot more parity this year.
I agree. Best edible on the gummy category, Smokies Watermelon Fruit Chews. I have tried those. Those are great. And as a mainly gummy person, yes, that I agree that is definitely one of my go-tos. My go-to is the Honeybee solventless strawberry basil mojito. Dude, they're 5 milligrams, and for like little boys like me who don't need much more than that, maybe 1, maybe 2, that's exactly what I need for my sleeps.
5 milligrams is exactly where I want to be most of the time. 10 to 20 is kind of my like, weekend. I'm not doing anything today type of engagement. And then once I get up above that, it's really just kind of unnecessary for me.
Yeah, me too.
I understand other people have a much higher tolerance as far as edibles and things than I do, but I'm not one of those 1,000 milligram gummy people. I've had a few of them, and they just sent me on rocket ships to the moon. So
right. Not interested in that. Best loyalty rewards program, Proper. Makes sense. I think they were my vote.
I think that says a lot for the company whenever you win best loyalty rewards. Right. Obviously, everybody wants to win best dispensary, but unless you have the same number of dispensaries as one of the top few in the state, it's going to be hard to get that award. That doesn't say anything negative about those companies, but just as far as scale, if you have 16 or 18 different stores voting for you, it's going to be really hard if you only have 3 or 4 stores to get the same number of votes.
Right.
We had over 150,000 votes cast this year.
Holy cow.
It was pretty exciting.
Holy cow. Dude.
So I think it's really cool that, again, parity in the industry. We had a different winner for best dispensary than we had for best loyalty rewards program. We had a different winner for best edible chocolate, then we did for best baked good, then we did for best gummy. And we haven't really seen that a lot before. We were all over the place, and we've got so many different brands and so many different companies in the space that it was nice to see a little more diversity in the selections than we have in some of our previous years.
Right. Well, once this gets out, well, I guess it is out to the public, not while we're recording this because it's top secret. We can have some of these winners on. I'd love to talk to people like Best Bud Tender, Celeste Davis. I'd like to talk to people like Ireland Strong, who won Best Brand Ambassador for Curador. Names I wasn't familiar with. Best Retail Manager, Crystal Farrington. Let's talk. You know,
I think it's really interesting to see that the same year that Ireland wins Best Brand Ambassador / Consumer Educator is a year where we see more wins from Curador as well.
I noticed that. Wow. Well, I'm going to flash up the details of the upcoming Greenway Cannabis Mixer, the Bodie Awards ceremony. Yeah. It's not really a ceremony, it's a mixer of sorts.
Yeah, the Greenway Industry Mixer, where we celebrate the best of the industry, is coming up on Saturday, March 22nd, I believe. It's going to be at Trops in the Grove. Okay. It's going to be organized by our friends over at the Cannabis Agency. We've got some cool sponsor partners that are helping us get the event together and get it organized this year. And much like last year, it's really just a cool opportunity to get a lot of people in the industry together, say hi, hang out for a little while, and celebrate the best of the industry, the nominees, the award winners, and in my mind, the voters as well. You know, it's one of those things where I really just enjoy the opportunity to bring people in the industry together. There's nowhere to be at a certain time or anything like that. Everybody just gets to come and kind of hang out, have some tasty treats and some beverages, and mingle for a little while. Hopefully, swap some stories and some business cards, and
that's what I do.
Make their next best brand partner.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I cannot wait. Last year was a freaking blast. So, but up next, Brandon, we have a wonderful guest, Reggie Harris of House of Kush.
It's going to be super exciting. I'm excited to talk to Reggie and to learn a little bit more about House of Kush and hopefully introduce the people of Missouri to their next new favorite brand.
When you demand the finest, every detail matters. At Teal Cannabis, they don't just create products, they craft experiences. From their expertly extracted concentrates to their carefully rolled pre-rolls and precision-engineered vapes, every product is crafted with the highest standards in mind. They believe in quality that speaks for itself. That's why they ensure that each Teal product delivers a smooth, consistent experience every time. Teal Cannabis. Elevate your experience.
Welcome back to Greenway Audio Magazine. We are super excited to be speaking with CEO of House of Kush, Reggie Harris. Reggie, it's super exciting to get to bring you on to the podcast, talk about the brand. You guys have been in the cannabis industry space for a few years now, but as a Missouri-centered company, someone who's from Kansas City and is now bringing your product into the Missouri market for the first time, we really wanted to jump at the first opportunity to bring you in and talk to you and tell the House of Kush story. And so we're super excited to have you here. And the first thing I wanted to say is thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate it. And we have been in Missouri, but not the way that we're coming out right now. So this is a big deal for us. And I never like to use the term relaunch because we never officially did the launch the way that I wanted to. So we're just going with the term launch right now. So
Sure. That makes sense. So but you are in other states as well, correct?
yes. Yeah. So we currently have product in Maryland, Ohio, and Michigan right now.
Okay.
And Maryland, the
great.
longest running. We've been in Maryland for about 2 years now.
Okay. Great. One of the things that popped up, I don't mean to cut you off, Brandon, but I'm extremely excited to talk about this. Your infused coffee product that's coming out in March.
Yes, sir.
Please tell us everything you can about that.
That's product. So, and I'll probably lift my coffee cup at some point during the conversation because I live on coffee. I'm one of those weird people. My wife thinks it's weird because I can drink a cup of coffee and 10 minutes later go to sleep and it does nothing. But I just love coffee. And with the brand, we of course are a flower brand. So coming up with other form factors is not always something that is intuitive. But if you think of beverages as a category, and I know it's a smaller category, but it's one of those that my opinion, and I don't know what my opinion is worth, but it's still my opinion. One of the things that we have in cannabis is a social nature to the product. As you bring new people to cannabis, however, they may not want to pass a joint back and forth, but they still want the social nature. Beverages allow you to do that, right? That's why we have bars. So with coffee, we came up with, and it was actually brought to me by our collaboration partner on it. And they had developed this formulation because they were a coffee company first that happened to love cannabis.
There you go.
We're a cannabis company that happened to love coffee. So it made sense. But the big thing that I think you'll appreciate when you get a chance to try it is this came from the coffee first. So they wanted to make sure it was the right roast, they had the right blend, the right beans, and that you didn't have a heavy cannabis taste to it, but still had the effects. So it was a process, and we've been working on it for probably a year before being able to bring it to market, perfecting not just the flavor, but then also the delivery system, because, little small things you don't think about, like dosing.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So everybody wants that bag of coffee, but hey, if I give you a bag, I can't control if your scoop overflows, if you do it flat, if you do multiple scoops. It's kind of tough for us to control how that works. So that's why for now we go with the pod delivery system, similar to a K-Cup, so that we can control the dosing and make sure that when we tell you it's 5 milligrams that you're getting in that cup of coffee, that's what you're getting.
Makes sense. So House of Kush, it, like you mentioned, it was basically flower first.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the House of Kush, the genetics you have, all that kind of stuff. I really want to hear about it.
So our origin story is interesting, to say the least. The first phone call that I got, and I consider myself an absolute newbie to the industry, by the way, that you'll hear me say. I've only been around cannabis since 2020. Prior to that, I was in professional football and running indoor football teams, and COVID, of course, shut down our season. One game into our season in 2020, we get shut down. And I'm in between. I was in Cedar Rapids running the team up there in Iowa, and I'm on my way home. I get a phone call from a buddy of mine that says, "Hey, I want you to take a phone call with Bubba Kush." Now, mind you, at this point, I'm the general manager of a professional sports team. I had never had cannabis before, had never tried it before. I'm the guy that suspended people for it.
Sure.
So when he says Bubba Kush, my immediate reaction was, sounds familiar, but I'm not really sure you call the right person.
Yeah. Right? Is this a linebacker from Oklahoma?
Right. So come to find out, he was working with Matt Bubba Berger, who was the first cultivator of the Bubba Kush strain and was part of the six godfathers that came up with OG Kush. And he was looking to create a sports product because if you remember back in 2020, that was right around the same time frame when Gronkowski had retired and started telling everybody about his CBD and cannabis use. So it was the craze of, oh, well, we're now going to create all these sports lines. Funny thing is, a CBD spray, while that was a fantastic product, once I did my research and background and had conversations with folks, we kind of went, we're missing the boat if we're not using the whole plant. And if we're not doing cannabis, nothing wrong with CBD in products and used where necessary. But if we're not taking advantage of the full plant, it's just not doing its justice. So we originally started the company using those OG Kush strains, Bubba Kush strains. That was the foundation of our journey. And we focused entirely on flower at that point, even though we still had some CBD products that we were looking at. We didn't go to market until we had a flower product. And actually, our first flower was released in California, and it was SFVOG. Was our first strain that we ever released back in, I think that was 3 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Wow. So, Reggie, I've had the honor of talking to you a couple of years ago. We had a conversation about cannabis and about professional sports. And both of us kind of came from the skepticism side of cannabis, like you just mentioned. I wasn't a big fan. I had heard maybe it had some medicinal benefits. Then I had an experience where I actually saw the medicinal benefits in a personal experience of mine with an athlete friend. Do you recall your kind of like aha moment or the moment you went, oh, okay, this can be beneficial to the players?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I started doing research. You'll find out about me. My son likes to tell me that I'm a professional nerd, which is why I made a good general manager, because I obsess about doing research and background. A lot of analysis before I do any decisions. Excuse me. So what I did was, the first thing I did was start calling some of the guys that either played for me. I also used to be an agent before I got on to the team side of things. So guys that either played for me or that I had represented in pro football, and asked them what they thought about if I were to get into the cannabis industry and what their experience was. Now, mind you, the guys that I called, I'm calling the guys that were the captains of the team, the leaders of the team, the model citizens. Imagine my surprise when every call, guys, went exactly the same. Every call that I made. First, they listened to me for about 30 minutes, only answer questions yes and no without elaborating. Sure. And then they kind of lean up and go, hey, coach, I smoke, right? And I went, no, that's why I called you, because I thought you were the guy that didn't. And I wanted to make sure that I was still going to be accepted in the industry. And so I had a guy that had played indoor football. He was in his early 30s at the time. He starts telling me about using cannabis because he had so much head trauma and damage from playing football. He had got to a point where he would leave his house and have to call his wife and say, can you help me with where I'm at and where I was going? This guy in his early 30s, what he used to be able to function as an everyday human was a regimen of cannabis. And he had gotten into an actual study where they were using cannabis, CBD, different aspects of the plant to manage. And he started telling me the story of where he basically could not function every day without the plant.
Wow.
And that was my aha moment, because this was a kid that, I say kid, he's a grown man, that I looked at, always had a smile on his face. He was a big lineman and, the gentle giant type guy that walked around and was doing things, and come to find out, were it not for cannabis, he couldn't even function.
Wow.
Which made me go back and then go, well, if I'm hearing all of these stories over and over, what is it about the plant that I've missed for all these years? So,
exactly.
I saw you guys talking about the fact that you both have DARE in your backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 51. I grew up in the time when, you didn't touch, not only did you not touch drugs, and cannabis and marijuana was talked about in the exact same language as cocaine and crack and all of these other destructive drugs. But growing up African American, I was in the South as well. I grew up in Florida. So I'm growing up in the South, being African American in a time period when it's the devil's lettuce. My parents raised me to where if you touch cannabis, your life is over. Mm-hmm. You get one arrest, one conviction, one misstep. You're not getting a college scholarship. You're not getting a good job. Your life is over if you touch cannabis. So that's how I was raised. And now I'm sitting here going, well, wait a minute. If this plant can really do all these things, why have we been sheltered from it all these years? So that caused me to do an even deeper dive and then start doing the research and finding the scientific reasons and the medical reasons behind it.
Wow. That's great. That's a great story.
I think it's really interesting. You talked about your story and growing up, essentially at the height of the reefer madness and the hippie stoner phases and things like that. I think part of the reason that we don't see as many, African American, Black and minority owners in the space as what we would like to is because a lot of them have had the same experiences that you grew up with. I think your story hits on a different level than that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting approach. So one of the things that immediately popped in my head when you talk about parents, so like I say, I'm 51. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, but he was around when I was first starting to get into the industry. And I still remember calling my parents' house in my late 40s, almost 50, going, hey, Dad, so I'm thinking about getting into this business. And at the time it was CBD. Am I still getting invited over for Sunday dinner type conversation? And a lot of what he said, and I vividly remember the conversation because, again, he was very quiet listening to me, didn't ask a lot of questions. And then he said, well, I only got two things to ask you about. And if you're okay with them, then I'm okay with it. He goes, are you going to have to get involved with politics? Because it seems like a very political debate. And are you going to be okay doing that and still being able to maintain your own identity and not get caught up in all of the rhetoric for the wrong reasons? The second thing that he asked me was, I'm not going to have to come pick you up from jail, am I? And I'm like, Dad, I hadn't heard you ask me that since I was in college. So that is a real stigma that we're still fighting. So speaking of college, I have a degree in accounting. I worked in Big Six public accounting, wore the suit and tie to work every day and carrying the briefcase, and I lived that life. I will tell you from experience, what the guys are doing in the accounting firms in the back rooms is really no different than what you're seeing happen out in the streets, but it's vilified depending on your social economic status. But the substances that I saw consumed when I was an accountant was no different. In some cases was even worse because they had the money to access it. So my perspective on it was I had already lived in that world where, the accounting firm that I worked at, there were 2 African Americans on the professional staff, and the other one was my older brother. Okay. So I had lived in that world, and in sports, especially on the management side, I've also been the only minority in the room that's the general manager. When I was in the IFL, I think I was the only African-American general manager. When I was in the Arena Football League, there was one other, and he was a former NFL player. So I was the only guy that got there through the business side and not through playing. So the stigma, and again, like I mentioned, the guys that I called were the guys that I thought were the upstanding citizens. So I even had the stigma in my own mind of what cannabis was and what it meant, and did not want it associated with me or what I was doing, because I already have enough knocks against me walking into the room. I don't need another one. So it is a very sensitive, difficult thing. And the time that we're living in right now, are we going backwards? Are things being uncovered that were always there and we just didn't pay attention to it because people weren't speaking it out loud? I don't know. But what I will tell you from my perspective is, it's funny to me when I find out how many of my, I call them suburban parents that smoke cannabis, that there's no stigma attached to them because they are the majority. Nobody makes a big deal of it. Excuse me. I got one of the dads on my son's baseball team. He's a high standing citizen and big in the union, and he finds out I'm in cannabis. He pulls me aside and says, "Hey, I smoke every night before I go to bed." People know that it's no big deal. If I do it, if I walked around and said it, simply because of the color of my skin, it's viewed completely different. It's not just a sleep aid. Now I'm the guy that's, I coined a term, puff, puff, pass culture. Nothing against puff, puff, pass culture. I sell a lot of product to puff, puff, pass culture, so I love those guys, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not the stigma that we want around our brand. And you'll see how we crafted House of Kush. We were very deliberate in crafting something that was top shelf, and kind of, our idea was Harley Davidson. You could use Apple a little bit on where we went with the actual designs, but Harley Davidson was the example that I gave everybody when we were creating the brand, because I wanted to be able to be the executive by day that then walked down and got on his Harley in the evening and on the weekend. There's no stigma attached to that, right? Because they were classy, elegant, and portrayed that way. Now, if a Hell's Angel walked into the room, everybody's scared and moving to the back of the room. But because the brand had been built that way with Harley, we're not, nobody takes offense to a guy wearing a Harley Davidson jacket, right? So it was crafted in a way, there is always the undertones of, when I walk in as a minority, you guys have been to all the cannabis events, the numbers are very dramatic. And it is difficult to get guys, a lot of guys that are minorities, to have the conversation, because they have lived in the shadows for so long and in secret for so long, they don't trust. So one of my new business partners is out in New Jersey, and they have a legacy program out there where they are trying to bring legacy growers into legalization. The hardest thing that they have is even getting these guys to trust that you're not luring them out to put them in jail.
Wow.
Even though it's legal and it's rec, they're still going, yeah, but can I trust you? Because for years, this is how you've crapped and put us in jail for how long? And the disparities there. So you have to even break down that stigma. Even me going in, talking to another minority, it's still all right, what's your angle? So there is a lot of that goes into the industry, but I also believe we have a lot of opportunity in this industry as well. And you have a lot of folks within this is a very collaborative industry. As much as we have a lot of negatives in the industry, we also have a lot of people that are willing to help and tell you where the resources are. Let me teach you more about the plant. Let me teach you better ways of doing things. So I think that's going to help the industry as well and help bring people in better. But that is a big issue that we deal with. Now that I ramble.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's extremely interesting. So as far as, if we want to talk a little bit more about House of Kush as a brand, speaking of nerds, Brandon and I are big branding nerds. I love the branding of House of Kush, as you can see on your shirt and behind you. But one of the things that has to be a challenge for you is being in multi-states. So you got Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri all have their different compliance rules and regulations and packaging and design limitations. You still have to carry some sort of consistent branding message.
Right.
How difficult is that, doing it between 4 states?
It sucks. If I can,
yeah, I bet.
If I can say it politely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the big problem with that is the way the industry is so disjointed because every state's different. Mm-hmm. What I'm allowed to do in every state's different. Packaging looks different in every state because the packaging rules are different in every state. So it's a constant, what can we keep that's consistent from one state to the other? And one of the things that I always go back to, and we're doing a better job of it now. We didn't do a great job when we first came out. Excuse me. Are the elements, right? I want people to be able to see that and think House of Kush. Reason being is I can put that on anything. That will never be told to take that off of a package or a T-shirt or a hat. And I can. Even the word Kush sometimes is deemed a negative, right? So being able to have a logo that people identify with, our word fonts. Oh, by the way, and I think I've said this publicly before, but I'm going to say it here anyway. You would be amazed how many people walk up to me and say, House of Kush, I've heard of you guys, when it's the first time we've ever stepped foot in a state. So when we selected our name and branding, we did that because we want it to be recognizable and be something that people felt like, I've heard this before, I've seen this before, it's comfortable. So even the name, using House and Kush, was very deliberate in wanting it to be something that you didn't have to wrap your head around or try to figure out what it meant or any of those type things. It was something that was comfortable to people immediately. Which, by the way, sometimes when people say that and I call them out and go, yeah, you've never heard of us, then they start telling me about our strains and I'm going, okay, you actually have. Good job, marketing department.
Right.
But it is extremely difficult going from state to state because of the regulation. Good example, when we launched in Maryland, they were still medical. So our jars in Maryland, actually, I was about to say they were super plain, but now our jars in Missouri are equally as plain, maybe even more plain now,
right?
Than what our Maryland jars are. But when we first came out with them, Missouri, we still had a glass jar that you could see the bud, and you had multiple colors on the label. But in Maryland, we just had a plain white jar with our black and gold logo, and that was it. All we could put on the label. Michigan, we could pretty much do whatever we wanted to on the label in Michigan. In fact, we had to be able to stand out. Difference, though, Michigan loves Mylar bags. Michigan doesn't like jars. So we went Mylar bags up there instead, which actually, when we release our flower next month in Missouri, we're going to go Mylar in Missouri now. So we have a more consistent look. Entirely the reason why we're doing it, because we wanted a consistent look between Michigan and Missouri, and we're going to transition some of our other states to that look and feel as well.
That makes sense.
So, are you guys noticing a difference in, or have you brought in anything to change as far as the shelf stability, switching from glass jars to Mylar? Because I know whenever the market initially launched, we had, everybody kind of had a preference as to glass or Mylar. But I think one of the things that I've seen is that if you're using the right materials and the right curing process and the right drying process, I don't see a lot of difference from glass to Mylar, especially if you're using things like Boveda packs and things like that to really control the humidity and stuff. So I was curious, as a company that has switched between those, if you guys see any kind of difference.
Yeah, I think I'll always prefer the jar, even though we're still using them in Ohio and Maryland. I prefer it, but that's just because I'm more of a classic old school mentality more than functionality. Functionality wise, there's not that much difference anymore. You can find the right, like you say, controlling the moisture and those type things. There's enough technology out there now to where there's not a lot of difference from Mylar to jars. From a business perspective, there's a lot of benefits going either plastic or Mylar because they're a lot lighter in shipping cost and space that it uses and that type thing. So if you can turn your inventory at a decent pace, it's not going to be a big issue, and you get a lot of business benefits by doing that as well. So there are some high-end jars that you can get that I would encourage people to look into, because there are some, like there's these pop jars that preserve freshness and that type stuff. You're really a pro at it. I was just getting some of those, buy your Mylars, and then put it into those pressure sealed containers to keep it fresh from the consumer standpoint. From an operator standpoint, we won't go there because the consumer wouldn't spend the money to buy that every time they go into the dispensary. But that's what if it were my personal stash, that's what I would do.
Hey man, I'm a sneaker geek. I get it. Like, it's the same thing as, do you let them make sure that there's a controlled environment? You see people that have had sneakers for 20 years and they haven't been in a controlled environment, and they squeeze the heel of it and it just crumbles up, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, it's great you held on to that for 20 years,
Yeah. I love that. You're in the sneakers and the hats. So, and I'll let you go to the next question, but I was going to just point out, this is one of the things that I love about our industry as well. You find someone from every walk of life in our industry, and people that don't, if you put the three of us sitting at a table in a bar right now, they will look at the three of us and go, how do those guys have anything in common? And we'll sit there for 2-3 hours having a conversation, because we'll find out we've got an awful lot in common. We would have never known it were it not for the plant bringing us together.
Absolutely.
And that's been Reggie, one of the greatest parts of the industry.
this is a topic that comes up every single show, because we talk about how, this industry hasn't been around for a long time. So people had to come from somewhere, and bringing the talents they have from that specific industry into this is amazing. It's like a gathering of the minds of all of these different industries that now have roles inside of cannabis. So you're exactly right.
We talked with, our first few guests. Tim Guchenritter from Timeless is out in Kansas City.
Love Timmy.
Tim and Tim. Everybody loves Timmy. But he and Tim and I all have some history in music. Now, they both were much more successful than I was. But that's a talking point for us. We talked to Ari Fish, who's the marketing manager for C4, who's also an artist. She has a history in fashion and in art and branding. Well, Tim and I both have a history in branding and marketing and things like that. Tim's gateway into the industry was through, his relationship with Kyle Turley, who was a professional athlete. My gateway into the industry was not through athletics, but I myself have had over 7 confirmed concussions. And so that's part of the reason that I use cannabis, is because of, a long-lasting after effects of several concussions and neck and back pain and things like that from playing sports and being a dumb young man for probably about 5 years longer than I was technically a young man. And so we've talked before. You talked about, obviously we touch on athletics and things like that. But the other thing that stood out to me is you have an accounting background. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've talked about before is, what do we need more in cannabis than successful and, well-represented accountants?
Yep.
Because cannabis industry is dying from tax code right now. And so we need to find as many opportunities for businesses to sustain growth and be able to conserve their funds as possible, wherever possible. And so to your exact point of, you look across the table and you've got the fat goth kid with the black nails. You've got the handsome silver fox over on this side, like nobody's gonna look at us and be like, oh, I totally get why those two guys are sitting with the successful, with Reggie, who's got a history of, successfully running multiple sports franchises. Like, we don't belong at the table with you, but I love that we're all here. And that's one of my favorite parts about the industry as a whole, is it creates a much more even playing field. And one of the things that we've really tried to do with Greenway, and that I see other companies do in the space, we recently talked about Camp Cannabis winning the Jane 8 Award and their efforts in promoting diversity and inclusion within their hiring practices and within their community and things like that. One of my favorite things is seeing other companies really open up the table and kind of say, all right, everybody eats. Come on. Like open the doors, and that's what we've tried to do with Greenway. I don't have any ownership. I don't have the ability to give anyone equity or anything like that. But what I can do is open my doors and say, sit down. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk as much as, the person that has 30% of the pie, even if you have less than 1% of the pie, because we want to get everybody the opportunity to build their brand, to build their exposure, and to really create an inclusive environment. And so the more that we see successful companies and successful brands like House of Kush be able to be represented by successful minority, Black, brown, LGBTQ, whatever it happens to be, I think it sets the table for more people to say, oh, well, maybe I can be the next one. And seeing guys like what they've done at Pressure Co., partnering with St. Louis University to create a scholarship program. It just, I love seeing people give back to the community and opening the doors to really invite everyone in. And I love that you have the same sort of mindset and philosophy that we do, that this is such a weird and kind of blended universe in the cannabis industry, that it sets the table for so many different conversations that you'd never have if it was just you and the person that you normally sit next to.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, my sports background helps a little bit in how we crafted the brand, but also in looking at the industry. So one of the things that I always told people about sports, it's a great unifier, right? Look at Kansas City. We've come together as a community around the Chiefs. And because the team's winning in championships and now everybody has this big identity, and you go and there's 70,000 people united for the same cause every Sunday, sitting next to each other. Now, here's the difference in that in cannabis, because both very inviting, both community builders. You go to Arrowhead Stadium, everybody in Arrowhead Stadium is wearing Chiefs gear, except the opposing team. But, I won't talk about Tim's Detroit Lions hat behind him. I'll hit that later. Yeah, I noticed. I'm just, But in cannabis, you can still be the rock and roll guy with the red beard and fingernails painted, sitting next to Tim, sitting next to me. We don't change into a uniform when we go to cannabis. We're still our own individual selves, versus in sports, when we bring the community together, all the fans are dressed the same. Everybody's wearing the same logo. No, you can be a Detroit Lions fan and still have an interaction with me in cannabis. Now, we may have some great debates about your choice in football teams, but there's still going to be that camaraderie because we unite around the plant. So I think it actually even takes it a step further than what we do in sports as far as community building, because you're allowed to be more of an individual. And I can go anywhere in the country with cannabis, and I don't have to ask what team you pull for.
Right. It's true.
So
that's a great point. Wow.
We definitely can't go to Philly and be talking about, any of the Missouri teams on anything.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny because I was just on a call before I got it. So one of our new collaboration partners is Eugene Monroe, that played for the Ravens.
Right.
And his partner, Leo Bridgewater, that's in New Jersey, is an Eagles fan. Yeah. So Leo's big thing now, we get on these calls and we're trying to talk business and we're trying to figure out genetics and moving things across the country. And Leo's got his big Eagles Super Bowl champion background and wearing his Eagles hat. And we're going, are we doing business today? Or are we still, you got your one, call us when you get a couple more. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic when you start mixing sports teams like that.
Oh yeah.
But we're so passionate about it. It's the roots of our company, pun intended. It's the roots of our company. If it were not for sports, I'm not sitting here today. And it's one of those great debates that we love doing. But the one thing that we can all agree on is the benefits that we do get from cannabis being in the industry, and not only how far we've come, how far we still have to go.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Reggie, we have been looking forward to this interview for a while now. So I really appreciate your insight and your candor and sitting down with both of us. This is, I feel like this is going to be a big year for House of Kush, and I couldn't be more excited about the coffee products. So we will definitely be talking about those when those hit the market. And that's March, right? Is that what you're planning on? There it is.
Let me turn around that way. You didn't see that. That doesn't exist.
Logo's genius.
It'll exist March 1st. Yeah, March 1st is when we'll start taking the pre-orders, and then it'll be delivered. Hopefully during the month of March, you'll start seeing it pop up in the dispensaries. The reason why I said you didn't see that is because we are still waiting on some of those final state deals to
packaging approvals.
Yeah. We've got most of the packaging done, but there's 5 other variances that they have to officially sign off on before you can actually put it on the shelf. So, but everything is approved. We're just waiting on the time now, because now we got to actually go produce all of it officially so that we can get it packaged and ready to ship, and then that final check after it's in its final form. So, but yeah, I'm thinking this is going to be a really good product, not just for us guys, but also, there is a growing groundswell in the female market of cannabis users. And I think this is a way to, my wife will probably get upset with me for saying this, but this is an easier way for women also to get involved with cannabis, because they can be intimidated by some of our dab products, for example, which some of them scare me. But yeah, this is an easier, more palatable way to get involved and start the journey and get the benefits.
Absolutely.
We've talked about appearances and things like that, and perception and stigma. Whenever I first got into cannabis, dabs, the entire concept of dabs freaked me out, because I grew up in an area that, we saw a lot of meth and crack pipes. And so the entire concept of smoking something, that was crystallized or that was waxy out of a glass device that you had to have a torch to hit, it seemed like, oh man, there's something completely wrong with that. Well, the thing that got me past that was whenever I realized that vaporizers are just the same as a dab rig, just in your pocket. And it's always those ease into it points that I think create the opportunity for people to find their entry point.
Yeah.
And that's one of the cool things about the cannabis industry as a whole, whether it's coffee, whether it's gummies, whether it's chocolates, whether it's a vaporizer because you've already been using an e-cig, or whether it's, a joint because you used to smoke joints, or because you're familiar with cigarettes, or whatever it happens to be. I think there's an entry point for every person at this point that's really kind of not one size fits all, but all sizes fit one.
Yeah. Great point there. And I will even add my own personal first time, because again, 2020, I hadn't even touched cannabis. My first cannabis experience really was after my dad passed away a little over 2.5 years ago, I guess it was. I had launched a cannabis company and had not actually tried cannabis yet, if you could imagine that. But when he passed away, I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep through the night, and I had gone for a month or so, and I was with a buddy of mine. I'm actually going to give him the shout out because he's over at Stash House, Chris Geyser with Stash House.
Chris,
and
great guy.
Chris was going, buddy, and I've known Chris before cannabis. All right, so I knew Chris actually from sports. I've known him from way back when he was at AOL running their NASCAR team. Okay. And he said, hey, let me give you one of these chocolate Chiba Chews. Go home, try this tonight. Call me tomorrow.
Such a good entry point.
Yeah. And that was when I fully went, okay, so the research is not only correct. Me personally, this changes quality of life, and it did it on the spot. So I've obviously grown to try other things in the industry that, in case my mom's watching, I'm not going to tell all of it, but now experience a lot of different form factors now. So
sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Reggie, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to see, what else House of Kush has in store in 2025. So can't wait to hear more from you and from the brand. And we appreciate your time with us today.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys bringing us on, and looking forward to having more future conversations. And let's actually go sit at that table at the bar and
we will
have the next
Let's do it.
So